The Ink and Paint Club podcast is intended for mature audiences only, so don't tell your parents! Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast, your weekly home for animation reviews and discussions.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Ink and Paint Club podcast here on the Ink and Paint Club channel. My name is JD, and as always, I'll be your host. And unfortunately, Kyle had some family business to deal with, so he won't be joining us this evening. But that nonetheless, I am excited for this episode. Today, we are talking with an animator artist that I hold personally in high regard. He's been doing internet animation for God knows how long, and is an overall really awesome person. So, please welcome to the show, Matt Wilson.
Hi, everyone. And it's been like 15 years, I would say, if you count high score. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's probably a good guesstimation. So Matt, thank you for being on the show here with us today. As our previous Chatting It Up episodes, where we interview artists and the like, we're basically just going to grill Matt here about his artistic inspirations and how his career is going and all that good stuff. So, Matt, if you are ready, we'll just jump right into the questions here.
Hold on. Okay.
All right. So we'll just go with the generic question that we start everybody off with. What made you want to start doing art, and what made you want to become an artist, basically?
So what made me want to become an artist was when I was in grade school, I was given a book. I don't remember. I'm not sure if it was for my birthday or not, but I was given a book called How to Draw Sonic the Hedgehog. And I believe it was based on the video games, not the various cartoon series.
Okay, so it wasn't How to Draw Sonic Underground, right?
It was not How to Draw Sonic Underground. That did not exist at the time. I think maybe Scratch and Grounder existed at the time, but not not the Three Dumb Kids and the Robot Baby.
Oh Jesus.
So yeah, that was my earliest influence. I drew those characters a lot this was pre-middle school, and then when I got into high school, I got a little more serious about art. Everybody else that I knew was sort of deciding what they wanted to do with their life, and I was a little late on that. My two friends were going to School of Visual Arts. I was not prepared to go to an art school because I didn't know how to draw yet.
Sure.
But I had been taking a web design class at the time, and that's where I learned about Macromedia Flash. And though I was supposed to be doing web design work, instead I was making fan cartoons of Dexter's Laboratory. And then in college, that graduated to making fan cartoons of Professor Utonium and Homestar Runner. And then as I started getting near the end of college, and I realized that life is important, so I should have one, and I should have a career in mind. That's when I started doing my original stuff. And that's when I started High Score, which obviously it started off as a motion comic. It wouldn't be until 2003 that I would really start to quote-unquote animate my quote-unquote cartoons.
God, 2003 takes me back, man. So, obviously you mentioned Sonic. But what would you consider some of your earliest influences what inspired your earlier work?
Yeah, this is good because we unbeknownst to the listener until I reveal it just now, but JD's computer crashed, and so we're having to redo this question, and
Yeah.
I kind of like stumbled around the question, but now I get a second pass at it. So when I was younger, I was really into Rocky and Bullwinkle, and I was really into Underdog, and I was really into what's another good one? Danger Mouse. That I loved. I loved Danger Mouse a lot. So I was at a very formative age. I was already into like different kind of humor than like I learned very quickly that the shows that I had bed sheets of as a child, like He-Man and stuff, were not that great. And when I was like, I don't know, like 11 or 12, like Freakazoid came on, and that was that was hugely formative for me. Rocko's Modern Life, and then when I got into high school and towards the end of high school, that's when I discovered Cartoon Network finally came on in my area around 1999. So I kind of soaked up all of those classic shows. And then towards the end of college, when I was, starting to actually take stuff seriously, I really became influenced by C.H. Greenblatt, the creator of Chowder and Harvey Beaks, particularly because I didn't have formal training and I did not go to art school, and neither did he. He got into his career by doing SpongeBob comics for Nickelodeon magazine, and it transitioned from that to him doing storyboards for the SpongeBob cartoon, and then from there he kind of ascended up and up until he finally got his own shows. And so that's very inspiring to me. The fact that like somebody who is not waist deep in it from conception, from the womb, still has a shot to make their own cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah, I mean, you told that story obviously when we were recording first time, but like I said before, yeah, knowing Carl's kind of story like that is actually really inspiring, because I know a lot of our listeners, and especially myself and Kyle, none of us have formal training. None of us went to some fancy art school, and knowing that someone like Carl could make such an impact on the industry is, it lends it to know that maybe there's some hope for all of us.
Yeah. So I always feel bad. I feel like his Tumblr is very much like a commiseration station. He's had some rough luck.
Yeah.
And he's taken it about how I would expect any person would take the string of rough luck that he has gotten.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad because I'm in the camp of people who has not actually watched Harvey Beaks, despite knowing full well how good it is. So I'm probably the reason that Nick kind of shuffled it off. But yeah, every time I see a Tumblr post about him talking about his experience with how Nick treated Harvey Beaks, my heart goes out to the guy, because it's like, that's just a rough deal.
Yeah, I can't speak to that sort of like inside baseball stuff.
Sure,
but
yeah.
But like, I really like the guy, so it's always a shame when he's having a rough time of things. But that even still, he was able to have a 3-season show on Cartoon Network and another show on Nickelodeon, and he actually had a lot of success, not as a creator but as a writer for what was the name of that show, Fish Hooks on Disney Channel. He and I think Maxwell Adams. I may be wrong on that.
Max was working on that too.
Yeah, like so like I know that he'll bounce back in a big way. I know this. I think he's just got to go through this sort of quagmire that he's in, come out the other side. I don't personally know the guy, obviously. He is in a different generation from me, but I I expect great things from him still to come.
Oh, I definitely agree. I mean, he'll bounce back from this, and if his last two shows have been an indication, I'm sure whatever else he comes up with is be equally as amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not too concerned.
Or you can wait 10 years and it'll get a reboot anyway. It'll get a remake TV special.
I mean, Jesus, at the rate this going, it'll be 5 years.
Yeah.
Because, God, we have words about reboots around this show, but
don't worry, I am not the negative one here. I am a positive person, so like I can't hold you back on that stuff, but just know that I cannot contribute to it to deep criticism of this stuff. I honestly don't get a whole lot of time to watch cartoons at this point, so whatever I find on, I enjoy. The minimal amount that I'm able to.
Right. Well, any bit of optimism is welcome around here. So.
Yeah.
But getting back to you, you mentioned that you work in Flash primarily. Is that like your main program for doing art, or do you use any other kind of programs?
Flash is the main program that I use. Obviously, I'm familiar with Photoshop. I have dabbled in After Effects, and I use Premiere to stitch my scenes together and export, because if you know Flash, it has horrible limitations.
Yes, it
and
does.
the longer a file goes, the less stable Flash becomes. Like, it can't really handle files larger than like maybe 2 minutes tops. So I tend to render out scenes, in 90-second files, and then bring them into Premiere and stitch them together. And it took, it was a little cumbersome at first, but I'm fully used to it now.
Well, I think that's a smart way to divvy everything up, because, Flash is kind of horrible when you try to do longer sequences.
Yeah.
So before we get into, like, your bigger projects, I just kind of wanted to ask, was there any other kind of material, like whether it be like animations or comics or whatever, that you produced before you got into like the big stuff like High Score?
Are you saying this just so I can talk about the Weapon of Choice fan video again?
It was on my list of questions, but sure.
Yeah, yeah. I did, and this isn't available on the internet anymore. I don't even know if it was put on the internet, but if it was, I doubt it's on the internet anymore. I was working, like, in 2001, like, my big thing was, like, I'm gonna make a music video of Professor Utonium dancing, and it's gonna, they'll show it on Cartoon Network. I think, like, at the time, they were doing those, what were they called? Groovies? I can't remember.
The Groovies! Oh, God, yes.
They were showing the Groovies, and, like, I was thinking, like, hey, I could maybe get a video on here, especially if I use... I didn't realize at the time the ramifications and legal situation involved of submitting an idea to Cartoon Network using their property, and how... they legally cannot accept fan ideas because they would put themselves at legal risk for doing so.
Because if that ends up in a thing, they're liable for a lawsuit and stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I learned that later on when I was less stupid.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean,
okay.
like, until, like, High Score was really the first thing that I truly, like, created from whole cloth, and I've made much better stuff since then. But yeah.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Christ, where'd my questions? Okay. So we'll get into like the real meat of it all now. So if you were around in, the early 2000s or something, you may have remembered a show called High Score, a very, from what I remember, short-lived series. It was only like 6 episodes?
Yeah, well, even that, I think it might have been 5, and then like I had started work on a 6th, but then like I think I thought at the time, well, I'll do bonus stage as a way of like building up momentum to the 6th episode, and then that just became the show at that point because there was so much more to it.
Sure. So I the first question I want to ask about High Score is like what was your main inspiration to make that show?
I had written down like humor. I just almost fucking said humor scripts. What the fuck? I had written down little skits in my notebook in high school, and I don't know if they had Phil and Joel at the time, but like they had some of the sort of genesis of what I would then do with High Score. And when I got into my first year of college, I was sort of doing very loose thumbnails for eQuest. I didn't know necessarily what the show was going to be at the time. I just thought, like, I enjoyed reading webcomics, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I can in some way do something similar, but have it be animated.
Sure.
This was prior to the big motion comic craze of the early to mid 2000s, when a lot of comic book publishers thought that was acceptable. So I started on High Score, and I wasn't working on it for very long ultimately, was I? Because like I think in 2002, 15 years ago, I think was like when eQuest went up. And then only a year and a half later, I think, is when bonus stage started. So like that was like you said, quite short-lived. And I don't know about influences so much, other than just webcomics in general, and wanting to do an animated one, because that's basically the genesis of it. But sure. Yeah, like I was really just learning literally everything at the time. I had no idea how to draw, and I still wouldn't for like another 7 or 8 or 9 years. But I was gonna make something regardless.
Sure. I mean, as long as you got getting something out there, man, that's admirable, man. I guess that kind of leads to my next question. From doing High Score, like as like your first big project, what would you say by the end of it? Like, what did you learn? Like any kind of tricks you learned, or like just what did you get out of the experience?
Well, I learned that I needed to have talking in my stuff.
Sure.
Because and to be fair, like that is still a thing I see on Newgrounds sometimes, is people will still do cartoons that have captions rather than dialogue, but like people are so much more engaged when the characters actually speak. They don't want to read. That's not
readings for nerds.
Readings for nerds. They don't come to cartoons for book learning. They come for sight gags and I guess pathos nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're watching Steven Universe and all that stuff, I mean, Jesus.
Yep.
Though that does not make that makes it sound like I hate Steven Universe, which actually I really love that show. So.
Me too.
Well, I'll probably say this any number of times during the interview here, but so much of your work has inspired a lot of my work personally. Just I'd probably say your art style in some ways, your brand of humor in a lot of ways. But one way that looking back on it, I think is kind of funny is that I attribute my now love of ska music to you, only because when I found the old High Score episodes, you used a Real Big Fish song as the intro.
I did. I used Real Big Fish's,
A Little Doubt Goes a Long Way.
A Little Doubt Goes a Long Way from Cheer Up. Yeah, that was, that album was a ska banger. I with Bonus Stage originally, I used Shed Some Skin from Slow Gherkin, and then I had to use a sound alike because I realized can't really get away with that forever.
No, but yeah, man, you used that song, the Real Big Fish song, as the intro, and it's like, what is this music? So I had to go. I found Real Big Fish, and I just ended up listening to their albums. That led me to like Less Than Jake and the Boss Tones and all of these bands, and it has slowly consumed my life. So I guess thank you.
I'm so sorry.
No need to apologize, man. I'm enjoying every minute of it. So
you just have to live with the fact that like your people consider like if you enjoy ska as I have done, and I'm much more into traditional ska now than third wave, but like
sure.
If you like ska at this point, people kind of consider you to be like a connoisseur, like a musical connoisseur of knock knock jokes or something. Like it has a very antiquated feel as a genre that I will not shed personally from my mind, but like I totally understand why people think it is dorky and terrible, but I will still listen to it.
Oh, man, I completely agree with you. Like, sometimes I'll be listening to, like, a Real Big Fish song, or hell, even listen to the Aquabats, just, like, I really fully am aware of, like, how dumb these songs are, but, like, just the sound of it is what kind of keeps me listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
Christ, where did I go? I keep losing my place on this question list, man.
That's fine. We keep diverting, so...
Yeah, there you go. So, like we were saying, you did High Score for a little bit, and that kind of spun off into the show called Bonus Stage, which I think a lot of people would probably be familiar with. So, I guess the question is, like, what inspired you to spin off from High Score? If there was like a reason, and like what made you want to transition to doing that as the full series instead of your old show?
So it's gonna be tough to recall some things from that era because it was so long ago.
Oh yeah.
But like I definitely know that the stuff that I was doing. This is one parallel to today's stuff that I do that is so much better than that stuff. But like, I realized that like the cartoons take time to make, like a lot of time to make long form episodes, and so I thought, well, I need to get something out that's a lot faster. So like, I began to think like, well, to some extent, my cartoons don't really have lip sync anyway. So even if I add voice acting, if I don't have lip sync, then I can still produce stuff relatively quickly and bear. And like that show is so full of motion tweens, and I mean, at some point I started to do it intentionally to lampoon it, but like, I was cutting every corner in the book to make it happen, and I think I just realized that like this is not only easier to do, but like it's probably more instructive for me since I can't draw yet.
Sure.
Like it's more instructive for me to learn all these other aspects of production, directing and comic timing and editing and story writing. That I never really did learn, but I tried to learn it. That is sort of why I kept doing Bonus Stage, and had I not gotten sick of it, I don't know, I probably would have done it for another couple years, probably.
Yeah, I remember it ended kind of abruptly. I mean, it had a conclusive ending more or less, but yeah, it seemed like it was I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I mean, like I had gotten tired of it, and I was ready to move on from doing essentially Aqua Teen Hunger Force with video game jokes. I was ready to move on from video game jokes in general. Like, I was, it was a fun thing to do at the time, and everybody was doing it. But, you start to crave a little bit more eventually. At least I hope people do. I see a lot of people still doing video game parodies and stuff online, but I assume that a lot of that stuff is just to keep the lights on, and I assume that a lot of people have, a desire to tell their own stories, and that's kind of why I stopped. Like, I was ready to distance myself from that, and especially because in 2006 I got my first professional animation job, I was really ready to distance myself from my old animation personality, where I was very abrasive and rude to people, and I was ready to turn a new leaf.
What was your first professional job?
I worked on a show for Nicktoons Network. You may or may not recall it. This was not I did not create this show, so I cannot, I'm saying when I say the show that I worked on, that I cannot vouch for its quality, but the show was Kappa Mikey.
Oh, man. I have a very ironic love of Kappa Mikey.
Yeah, I worked on the second season of Kappa Mikey with a bunch of other artists, and some of them are, at least a couple of them, have moved on to really good stuff. So,
Well, that's cool, man.
Yeah. I had a coworker that, I'm sure it's on their IMDb page, but I'm sure they still don't want it blasted out that they worked on Kappa Mikey, and now they're, at Cartoon Network as a show creator. So, it's...
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a starting point for a lot of people, and it was also, they paid really well, which is something that a lot of studios don't do a whole lot of anymore on the non-union side. So, I don't have any real ill feelings about my time there. I just I can't really speak to the quality of anything we produced, because, a lot of it was very much rushed, and very little of it was artist focused.
Sure, right. I mean, you're there. You're paid to do a job. You do the best with what you got.
Yeah, and I enjoyed doing it. But it was, it was at that time that I once again was thinking about the kind of stuff that I would make, when I would have some time independently again. Right.
Well, I mean, that's cool, man. I didn't know you worked on that show. So that's kind of a cool connection. Tangentially related to that subject, my co-host Kyle won some contest back in the day from Nicktoons, and he won this guitar with Kappa Mikey on it.
Awesome.
And I've been hounding him for years, like, dude, it sits in a closet. I want that guitar.
That's amazing.
If I can dig it up, I'll send you a picture of it later.
Awesome. I definitely want to see that.
That it's hilarious that he has that. It's so random of a thing to have. But I mean, I do. I get that working on a show like Bonus Stage for so long, you kind of get exhausted with it and you want to move on to it. But for me personally, and I'm sure I can speak for a lot of people, I commend you for how much you put into that show, because not only were you basically producing a new almost 5 to 10 minute episode per week for long stretches of it, but you did all the animation yourself, you did all the voices yourself,
up until the end, and then Rena Chan helped out.
Ellie's voice got a new actor,
who is now the voice of what's the character's name? The main character of Nier Automata. 2A or
2B.
2B. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
We were at a friend's house a couple weeks ago and they were playing it.
Kira Buckland is her name, and
that's cool.
Yeah, she's in a lot of stuff now. Definitely go support anything that she's in because she's cool.
Definitely. But yeah, and where was I? Yeah, and as for much as you say that you can't draw, I would argue that Bonus Stage had very diverse character design work.
It did, but like I attest that like I was not like it took me a while to really get figure drawing and not and like the idea that like you're not just like getting from because I didn't take life drawing classes in high school, so getting from the stage of like like contour drawings, and going from contour drawings to being like, wait, like, but you don't just draw around the outside, like for a long time, like I didn't draw like any of the like I didn't do any like base construction for my characters. Like I would just draw straight on. I would just draw the eyes and then the head around the eyes. I don't do that anymore.
Sure.
But like that was a way that I drew years ago, and now I do it a little more properly. It's still not the most properly, but a little more properly.
Oh, I mean, definitely comparing Bonus Stage to the stuff you're putting out now. I mean, character design, while again I argue was not bad, is definitely vastly improved.
Yeah, well, because back then. I largely favored geometric shapes and very simple symbols to define the characters, and I've shifted away from that nowadays.
Sure, yeah, and like I was saying earlier, a lot. I think what attracted me to your work early on, and especially nowadays, is that I feel like you've got this. It's hard to explain certain kind of sense of humor. It's very fast. It's very smart.
Is it?
What I personally think it is. I
if you say so.
I mean, I genuinely enjoy your sense of humor. I get a lot of laughs out of it, and especially like nowadays in your stuff. Some of it is reference humor, but I feel like the way you work it into dialogue now, it's not overtly like Family Guy where they're just like directly referencing something. Like I like how you kind of slip it into stuff.
Yeah, and I have fun with it.
Stuff that people say.
I have fun with it because like Lemurian has like a very strict policy of like no references, and if people do references around him, he'll call it out.
Sure.
And that's a character trait of his I want to explore in the future. But yeah, like I try not to do too many references nowadays, mostly because I'm cognizant of how quickly stuff can date.
Yeah.
Like the cartoon that I did. Cartoon is putting it as a stretch, but the 5-second thing I did making fun of JonTron, and I won't go into that too much, but like
sure.
That'll be dated. Like a couple months from now, no one will know what the heck the point of that was about. So, like it's just all I want stuff to be timeless. I want the humor to stand up. Maybe not 10 years from now, but at least 5 years from now, it would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone back and watched early episodes of Deadly Space Action and all that stuff, and I feel it still holds up. And hell, I can go back and watch old episodes of Bonus Stage, and I still get a good laugh out of it. But I think what I wanted to ask was like, because I think your brand of humor is very unique. But what would you say like has inspired your brand of humor?
It used to be very cynical. Like I used to have a very cynical view of the world, which I think is probably not unusual for somebody that goes through their 20s and gets out into the world and sees how shitty it is. Like that informed a lot. And then I went to do some professional jobs. and my attitude changed a lot. Well, first I became more mellow. I no longer treated my fans like garbage. Although actually, I kind of disappeared from the internet entirely for a while in order to help rehabilitate sort of my image. But the stuff that I do now is I don't know if I would say optimistic, but it is a lot more in the spirit of fun. And so even if there is occasional like cynicism in there, the cynical elements are tempered by very silly moments or other characters deflating the cynicism. I try to keep like a general good balance of positive and negative characters along a certain like positive and negative spectrum, to balance each other out. But also, like, if one person, if it makes it seem like one character is like a mouthpiece for me, I make sure that another character quickly refutes that by countering or deflating their arguments.
Oh man. I mean, well, I think that that early cynicism. I think because when I was watching your cartoons, I mean, I this is kind of a sidebar, but I was introduced to Bonus Stage pretty early on by a friend because she was like, "Hey, I found this silly cartoon. This seems like it'd be right up your alley." She showed it to me, and I was watching every week after that. But I think that brand of that kind of cynicism, I think, like you said, kind of comes from getting out into the world and kind of seeing how bleak the world can be. But I think it also kind of resonates with like angsty teens who are kind of like just mad at everything all the time.
Yeah, and my demographics showed that. Like, I think like the majority of people watching Bonus Stage were teenagers, which ad people will tell you is bad, because that is a demographic, and like, this is a little inside baseball. I generally don't care about the demographic of the people that are watching. I'd like a balance, but whoever watches. But they'll tell you that like teens generally don't. They're very fickle with their purchasing habits. Which was definitely true for me as a teen. So like it's hard to necessarily sell to them. Like, it's hard to put an ad in front of their face that they're really gonna care about. Sure. Like, I think like the one ad campaign that I was able to have fun with that I think got people interested was I don't remember if it was Guild Wars or something else. It was an MMO. Saga of Rhizome.
That's what it was. I remember that.
Yeah, like, and I think like teens on the internet were definitely about MMOs, and I could have some fun, because I would then take that very same ad and like parody it later. So like it would show that like, yeah, this is an ad, but like it doesn't have to be garbage. And yeah, that cynicism, it works for teens, and nowadays I know that my audience is still predominantly male, which bums me out a little bit. But like, I think that the median age range has gone up a little bit. It's still pretty young skewing, and I think that may just be because of the free time that people have is more and more when you're younger than later on. I had hoped that my cartoons would be something that people could watch on their break at work, but then I realized that like there's just as much a chance nowadays that YouTube is blocked on office servers. So
yeah, exactly.
That's a factor that I consider nowadays, and so I'm mostly just happy with whoever is willing to watch, whether it's teens or really cool kids that want to learn how to cuss, and no, please don't get mad at me, parents. I don't I don't want to have to put warnings in my stuff that it's for adults. I would like to think that it's obvious when you watch it, but
Yeah. We recently started putting a language warning on front of our podcast because I realized, like, we're reviewing kids' movies a lot of the time, and then sometimes kids find our reviews and are like, I don't want parents, like, getting mad at us for stuff like that.
Now, are your reviews on YouTube or just via the podcast, like on iTunes and stuff?
It's all on YouTube right now. We used to have it on iTunes, but then we had a problem with our hosting, and I just am lazy and never got around to fixing that problem.
Then I would say that your fear is mostly, you're probably right to do that because, like, kids YouTube is such a thing. You know, they hop from one thing about their favorite movie to the next. There was a whole video about all the terrible videos on kids YouTube about. I mean, it started with Spider-Man and Elsa, but, you know, like, there are these people that just, like, generate almost, like, procedurally generated cartoon content for kids to gobble up based on their favorite movies. So, like, I'm sure that if you review a kid's movie, that it probably has a higher chance of getting picked up by SEO and recommended to kids' YouTube, so... You know, putting that language disclaimer is important. My dad watches the stuff that my nephews watch on YouTube a lot, and they watch Let's Plays and stuff, and some of it does have, you know, adult language in it because it's Let's Plays, and people who do Let's Plays generally, you know, are unfiltered because it's live while they're playing. So, I personally try not to worry too much about it. Like, I've never gotten a complaint about the language in my stuff, but I have also not really seen any significant tracking of kids watching the cartoons. So, I think I'm okay in that regard.
Yeah, I've never been too concerned, especially, like, your stuff nowadays. I think plays it pretty safe.
I think. There is an occasional, like, a very occasional F word, which I never used to do. But, like, a lot of my stuff can almost be PG at times. Like, I don't get... It's not too crass.
No. It's... There's not a whole lot of gore, and the language is pretty tame most of the time.
I'm not one for gore.
Right. But, yeah, like I was saying, I think your brand of humor, the way you write and stuff, I think that's where a lot of the... you personally, I don't think, have to rely on kind of that kind of crass language to get your humor across, which I think is nice. But getting back to bonus stage here for a minute, since that show was so long running, I mean, how long was that show running for?
Not as long as you would think, because it started at the end of 2003. It started in, like, October 2003, and the final Lost episode was put out in March 2006.
Wow.
It's just that because it was a weekly show, there was just a lot of content that was produced for it. So there ended up being, like, 88 episodes.
Yeah. That is weird. It does seem like it was a lot longer than that. Weird. But with a show that not, like, time-wise long, but, like, the amount of content you produced long, what would you say you got out of that experience?
I definitely learned a lot about directing and timing from doing that. I learned a lot about comedy and, like, stuff that works and stuff that doesn't work. Especially, it's instructed to me now to sometimes go back and rewatch that stuff just to see, like, you know, what stuff I definitely should not put in scripts anymore, and what kind of jokes still play.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's always a learning process with everything I do. I'm always taking something out of it. So even if it's not like a commercial success, I can move on to the next cartoon with something new in my quiver.
Sure, yeah. That makes sense. Well, that's good that you're able to carry that kind of that everything you've learned onto your next series like that. Um, so I mean, bonus stage had a lot of characters, especially by the end. So I guess I wanted to ask, like, who was your favorite character to write for?
I would enjoy writing for Craig a lot because
Craig.
I could do stuff that would seem very out of character for them, but because of his nature, you wouldn't necessarily know if it was out of character for them. Like, I really enjoyed "Let's go to the store," and then just suddenly, like, he's like mad dashing through.
Yeah.
Like, I liked Craig a lot. I like an everyday man character like Phil. Obviously, this is why I brought him back. Otherwise, like, I do sometimes like to transpose characters from one property into another, but there are not a ton of people from bonus stage that I really transposed. I would say that, like, obviously the ones that went into game show, but Craig. It is implied in an episode of Deadly Space Action is like a great descendant, a great ancestor to Madison, who started off a little bit like Craig, but then I kind of made her branch out and be a little more fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Craig was one of the one of my favorites as well. Yeah, God. Just all of these, like, little bits and pieces from bonus stage are just all flooding back to me at once. I'm like, Jesus Christ. God, middle school was crazy. So we kind of mentioned how you after bonus stage you kind of took a break. Obviously worked on Kappa Mikey for a bit. So yeah, you were gone for a couple of years, and I don't even remember how I stumbled upon your stuff again, but you resurfaced a couple years ago. It's been quite a few years now, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that it was probably because Ego Raptor gave me a bump on the first season of Deadly Space Action, because I think that's where a lot of my traffic came from initially.
Okay.
He did a voice for the Adventures of Mark and Tony, which was a pilot I did.
I remember that.
A while ago, I probably around the same time as the lost episode of bonus stage, probably 2006 to 2007, in that range. So he did a voice for that. So we've always been very amiable. We've been good acquaintances through the years. So he signal boosted me there. And so
awesome.
yeah, like that's probably, like, I wish that, like, people of that size and stature would link to my stuff more often. It would help me a lot.
Sure.
But it just is what it is.
Yeah. But after since you took that break, I guess, what was, like, what made you want to come back? Make the move to YouTube, and, like, start doing bigger animated projects again.
Well, I to some extent I had not stopped wanting to, but there were personal factors that got in the way. So in 2007, I was working on a cartoon, but there was a burglary of my apartment and
Oh shit.
my tablet PC at the time. And this is 10 years ago, but my tablet PC was stolen, and I didn't have backups at the time.
Christ.
So, like, bonus stage, I only have backups through, like, episode 60. Although, to some extent, that also taught me to not, like, to back up my stuff, but also to, like, not, like, always carry around your past with you forever. Because there's maybe not necessarily a need for it. But yeah, like, I wanted to do cartoons, but, like, that burglary was such a downer for me that, like, I didn't create for a long time. Like, for a couple years, it happened in 2007, and I didn't get back into it until, like, 2010. So for years I was just like stymied by that, and then finally, I thought I have to get out of this. I have to create something, and I need to do it like I did bonus stage, where I need to see if I can just create something within a week. And I had a premise that I had been working with about an evil space captain that was really inept. And at the time, it was just a skit, and the bit was like he was a space pirate, but it was like piracy in terms of like he has bootleg DVDs. And he was going around threatening people with that, and nobody cared. So like I said, I'll take these characters. I won't do that script, but I'll take these characters because I think it was Lemurian and maybe Orton and like maybe one other person. But I was like, I'll take these characters and just see what I can get done in a week. And so I put together the idea of like, you know, like a web designer like getting hired to be a lackey, a henchman, and, you know, not really understanding why they're being confused for a lackey, but just kind of going along with it.
Sure.
And I was able to get it done within a week. I probably overworked myself to do so, because after that point, I think episodes took 2 weeks to put out. And I cut a lot of corners, but this time, I think a key difference is I actually did go and put, you know, actual actual lip sync in, and I built out rigs. I had taken some of the stuff that I had learned from professional animation, and I had done stuff like building rigs and having arm libraries full of arm bends and stuff, and pre-made mouth charts. And I was able to do it in a week, and I found that I really liked it. And so I just decided, all right, I'm just going to kind of flesh this out week by week and build a little universe here. And that became the show.
Yeah. It was really cool when, you know, Deadly Space Action was first coming out. I mean, it was nice to see this, you know, this animator that, you know, I loved when I was like, you know, middle school, early high school. And now I'm an adult, and he's like still putting out stuff like that. And it's like even better quality than the previous stuff. So it was really great to see you get back to form like that. But speaking a little bit about Deadly Space Action, because like you're saying, like you have this evil space captain and his lackey is a web designer. So obviously, like the concept for this is kind of a little out there. What made you come to that idea exactly?
I was really into the idea. Well, first of all, I really like the concept of shows about jerks who are jerks, but like they kind of get what's coming to them, or they generally don't win. So like they kind of deserve their misery a little bit. Because there are plenty of series where someone's a jerk but he always wins.
Right.
In today's, you know, TV and cartoon landscape. But like I was really interested in bad guys generally lose anyway. And I wanted to try writing from the bad guy's point of view, especially if it was like a really dysfunctional crew that like, because another thing that I had felt was a lot of stuff that happens in these action and sci-fi shows, the reality is that like there would be so much red tape that would get in the way, and so much bureaucracy and so much like awkwardness that would really prevent stuff from getting off the ground. And that formed a lot of the first season's humor. The idea that like pushing the episode with the nerds where like Lemurian is telling Orton to like blast everybody, and he's like, I haven't really installed the laser systems, and then he does, and it's like this long, complicated install wizard.
Right.
Like that stuff I find really funny. Like I have to always remind myself when writing scripts, like it can't be like actually too serious, like space battles. Like there always like generally needs to be like something that kind of like throws a wrench into the works, because that's just how society is.
Right.
You don't just get to just do things.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about it. Like, you have all these like very diverse, interesting characters for every one of your projects. So I'm kind of curious about like what your process is for creating and designing characters. Like how do you start out? Do you like come up with like the design first and the personality comes later, or vice versa? Or how does that work?
It might depend on the series, but usually I have a personality in mind when I'm sort of writing up a little mini Bible of the show. But I think with Deadly Space Action, like I had designed Orton and Sage without necessarily knowing what the purpose of them was going to be yet.
Okay.
I just kind of like wanted to design two kind of nerdy characters that were going to be a couple. With other series, especially as time went on, I became more cognizant that representation really matters. So like I began to put more, as some angry YouTube commenters would say, force diversity into my cartoon, which is a good thing, and not a bad thing like they claim. And it creates more visual variety. It adds more contrast between body types, and it lets me have more fun as a designer and also as a writer, because the different life experiences that people have can lead them to completely different behaviors and opinions on certain topics. So yeah, like it will depend on project to project, but I usually think like character personality wise first, and then I will design a character, and and then after that, like based on the design, I'll think about sort of their life experience and background and how that further shapes their character.
Well, yeah, that's interesting.
I will also say it's important to have like a balance too. Like I want to make sure that like my shows have, sort of contrasting characters. I always feel like there needs to be a positive. It's dumb the way I break this down, but I like the idea of there being almost like a D&D alignment chart, like like a positive character, like a flat-out positive character, a flat-out negative character, a character that's neutral, a character that's shades somewhere between neutral and positive, and a character that shades somewhere between neutral and negative. And obviously, if I wanted to, I could also go down the whole D&D alignment chart. But like that's sort of the basic like balance I try to create in all my shows. Even if it's not necessarily captured in the entire main cast, that it gets fleshed out in the surrounding cast.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. That's your process. I know for me personally, I kind of work the other way around, where I'll end up sketching a character and be like, oh, like this, how can they fit into the story? And I think that ends up, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But I think your approach of like, how does this character thematically and personality-wise fit into a story, I think is a good approach.
Yeah, now I will do extras. I will just straight up design and then just throw in.
Sure.
So like in Princess Nest, there were characters walking around in the background. Those weren't based on anybody. They weren't like cameos or anything. There was like one cameo of a friend in one shot. of one of the episodes, but for the most part, like, I was just drawing them straight on, and I was taking walk cycles that I had already made for other characters and basically transplanting the art. And so for that kind of stuff, I will just go ahead and do it. But for any character that's going to be, a major role, I tend to think about it quite a bit.
Oh, that's good. So when you made your return and started putting Deadly Space Action, you started up this new branding cartoon drive-through, and moved everything over to YouTube. Was there, because I think, because before you were hosting on your own website or KeenSpot, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen you say you still post to Newgrounds, correct?
Yeah, occasionally I do post to Newgrounds, especially when I have finished. If I have a full story arc, I'll put it on Newgrounds. If it's in progress, I'll usually wait. And so Newgrounds just this week, as of this recording, got the Puzzle Hunters episode that went up, that I had been putting up over the past month on YouTube. Alec is amiable, that's pretty much I don't know, Newgrounds is such a back burner thing, that I always sort of only remember to do it after everything else has been squared away. So I don't know. I mean no disrespect to Tom Fulp, who donates to my Patreon. Hi, Tom. I just mean that I'm oh yeah, Newgrounds, and then I put it up.
Oh man, I mean, I don't blame you at all for that. I mean, 99% of the time, I kind of forget that Newgrounds is still around. But people are still posting to it.
It's still kicking. They used to do a yearly get together. I don't know if they still do anymore. But they're still humming along. They're moving on beyond Flash because it's being depreciated by Adobe. Yeah. So they're scaling towards HTML5 video and stuff.
That's nice.
Yeah, they'll still be around. They're very much an important website for kids, who want to get into animation and don't know the first thing, to kind of have a community to themselves where they can learn and not necessarily be shit on by the world. It's kind of their little safe space to experiment in, and then, when they're ready, they can move all out into the world. But many people still do post their stuff to Newgrounds. I don't know if it necessarily people like Oni NG does, but I know that Joe Gran of Great the Show will still post stuff there. So, and I think Egoraptor, when he does put stuff out, he'll put stuff there, and I think even Harry Partridge will put stuff on Newgrounds when it's done. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's probably, it's going to be kicking for another 5 to 10 years, I would say.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear, because I know I'm sure a lot of our listeners and, me, and I'm sure a lot of my friends, a lot of our early internet animation exposure was through Newgrounds. So
yep.
It's good to know that an institution like that is still around and doing well. But I guess my question was, when you made your return, what made you gravitate towards posting your stuff to YouTube rather than continuing to use Newground primarily, or your own kind of hosting?
Times have changed a little bit since then, but bandwidth used to cost a lot for... And SWF files are nowhere near as large as the video files I'm now outputting are. So, the bandwidth costs for hosting their own video site are just... It's not doable. I still want to have a website eventually. It's just that, people don't consume entertainment the same way they used to. So, people don't necessarily, go to a third-party website to watch cartoons. You've already seen, with CISO now starting to wind down that like these mega companies are finding it difficult to have their own video services. So if it's rough for them, like it especially doesn't make sense for someone independently to be trying to go it alone when these resources exist to offload the bandwidth costs. You know, I mean, I just wish it was better, but but like it certainly is preferable to eating the costs of hosting the video myself.
Yeah, I feel that. And I mean, I definitely agree with you about, you know, all the convenience of having it all in one centralized location. Because you see all these companies nowadays are like, they see the Netflix route or something and they're like, oh, we want a piece of that ourselves. I mean, I'm still kind of baffled by this, kind of, but not really. The other day, Disney said that they're going to be pulling all of their stuff from Netflix because they're going to make their own service.
They just did a deal with Netflix too, didn't they?
Yeah, that's what I thought was confusing. It's like literally like 6 months ago, it's like, we've got this exclusive deal with Netflix and all of our stuff's going to go straight there, and everything's going off of Hulu or whatever else, and it's going straight to Netflix exclusively. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And then just a couple days ago, they're like, well, by end of 2018, we're pulling everything from Netflix and making our own. It's like, that's...
I think that Disney may be like the only company that can really kind of do that, because like with stuff like CISA, which is NBC Universal, that NBC Universal is a big company. They're a conglomerate, and they could not make it work. I think it works for Disney just because they have stuff that if they create scarcity with it, people will want it. Like,
sure.
I don't know necessarily, like, I love the My Brother and Me show, but I like if NBC was like, the only way you can get it is through us, I don't know that a lot of people are like, all right, well then that's fine, bye, we're not gonna check it out then. Like it's not the kind of in demand like Frozen or, you know, like the new DuckTales. You know, if that goes on Disney's streaming service, that will be highly in demand, and I think that they'll have, you know, success with that.
Definitely. Compared
to, you know, if I'm trying to think of like YouTube Red, but not YouTube Red specifically, but I'm just thinking of those kind of shows that are on YouTube Red. Like, hey, it's PewDiePie versus whatever. Like, I don't think anybody's like, I've got to pay for this streaming service just to have this one show about PewDiePie.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Every time I'm pitched by a commercial or something, it's like, get YouTube Red, you can get this, and this show, and I'm like, there's just nothing on there that is enticing me to pay whatever YouTube wants a month for that. I mean, not getting ads would be great, but like, I'm not interested what, you know, an original Game Theory episode or show, or the Game Grumps show that they're putting out, you know, maybe a little bit, but it's not enough to want me to pay for another streaming service, basically.
Yeah, and I support Aaron's show and Dan's show, but like, you know, I'm trying to be real about it too. Like, I have some beef with YouTube Red in general. I think a lot of animators do, because like it's not really clear how much of the money is like really going to us.
Right.
And I'm generally of the opinion that they should seek out quality animators and have them produce shows, you know, the way that they've always done it, but just pay their living expenses. And instead, from what I've seen, they do have a show that is by a writer from Family Guy, and I don't have any beef with Family Guy, but like, that's a person that does not create on the internet already. Like, there are people who create cartoons on YouTube. Like, if you're gonna create an exclusive show for YouTube Red, you should find somebody who makes cartoons on YouTube and contract them to make a show. But the problem is these companies don't see it that way. Like, they don't trust, you know, an individual person to be able to do it, even if they have done it and have a track record of doing it. It has to be corporate, and it has to be like a big name, and it has to be somebody with TV experience.
Right. I mean, just putting a name out there. Say Harry Partridge, who, to be quite honest, baffles me to this day that does not have his own TV show or something. Because that man is a genius. Get someone like that, and that would entice me. Like if you told me right now, Harry Partridge has a ongoing animated series exclusive to YouTube Red, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, if like they, because I know that Studio Yatta is actually a lot busier than it seems. Because I know that they, I think that they did the animation for that DreamWorks TV show, Big Mouth or Too Loud. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I think so.
But like, you know, if you like, there are studios out there that have done internet animation for like the Star Bomb and stuff. Like, get Harry Partridge or get somebody like that, or David Firth or the Weeble guy, and like get Studio Yatta, or get the people who animate for Mystery Skulls or whatever, and be like, hey, here's a budget. You've got a year. Keep us updated, and we'll release it in 2018. And you can pay their living expenses for a year, and that probably would cost maybe a couple $100,000 at most. But they don't do that. They don't listen to ideas like that, and it makes me sound bitter. But it is frustrating. Like, I would like to see them do more with that. They'll go to YouTube creators in the community for their live action stuff. They'll take PewDiePie or they'll take Jacksepticeye,
Sure.
and they'll give them shows, but they're not coming to the animators and doing that.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping that maybe, if after a couple of years, maybe they'll, see the animators as a more viable money source, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll keep our fingers crossed at least. So navigating back to your work.
Yeah, this has gone into a ton of rat holes, and I apologize.
Oh man, if you've listened to any of our other shows, it's one tangent after another with us. So
yeah,
you're right at home. So obviously you've got Deadly Space Action going. And then you started up another series a little later on called The Puzzle Hunters.
Yeah.
Another show that I greatly enjoy. What brought that idea on?
Okay, I can actually, this one I actually have a little even more sort of knowledge of. I had a pilot pitch called The Mega Rad Strangers, which was about people who didn't have superheroes pretending to have superpowers and fighting crime.
Sure.
I think that pitch is actually not that original, but like I took the characters from that, and they looked different back then. But I took the premise of that and was like, I'm a person who likes puzzles. How about a show where like puzzles are considered sometimes like a matter of life and death? And so the initial premise was not that. The initial pilot was still very much based off of the Mega Rad Strangers pilot script that I had done, and so it was a lot more like superhero focused, but like the show itself I think has clung a little more tightly to the idea that they're in this city, Los Angeles, and there are puzzle emergencies that they have to solve. And I think the attitude that I tended to gravitate to is that like one character is super into this stuff, and the other characters are just sort of along for the ride, and they would rather not be, but they have to be. So Riff is, Riff sort of goes along with it. He's, a very paranoid, a very cowardly person, but like he's generally supportive. Sonata is not supportive at all and would rather, watch anime. But it was from there that I came up with that I had a dynamic that I was really happy with, that I could make several episodes with, to the point where I could do an episode where Harmony is not the one necessarily solving a puzzle. It's, Riff and Sonata, and they don't get anything done because they're just like goofing off with each other, and Sonata is just like sabotaging the whole thing. That's a rich mine of material for me to work with.
It's just funny seeing this show that is like very almost kind of akin to like a Scooby-Doo mystery show, but where a way you have a trap is you gotta like do a Sudoku puzzle or something.
And there was an anime that is not very good called Fibrain that I watched. It's between the pilot and the full series that like takes the puzzles even more seriously than I do. Like they almost treat it like a shoujo show or like Yu-Gi-Oh, where like there's like these deep thought moments, and I thought like I'm not gonna do that, but like I can do a show that like takes this stuff seriously, but is also like aware that it shouldn't be taking this stuff seriously, and so there are characters that are just not in on the joke.
Sure. So you say you're into puzzles. Like, what kind of puzzles do you like to do?
My favorite type of puzzle is Picross, nanograms. Okay. I love the Professor Layton games. I have to get the new one when it comes out on 3DS. I'm trying to be patient and not buy the iOS version, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I do a lot of Cryptic Crosswords before I go to bed. I like to do crosswords to tire my brain out. I like the really hard crosswords, but I also like Cryptic Crosswords where they give you basically a nonsense sounding clue that is a bunch of wordplay, and I probably will integrate that into an episode at some point. I used to be big into Sudoku. Like I am one of the very few people that 100% completed Everyday Genius Square Logic, which is this game on Steam that has, I think, like 20,000 puzzles. I can't remember the exact number. I 100%ed that because I played it every night in bed until it was over. Like any kind of like logic style puzzle, I generally am deeply into. That's why I was also a fan of. I'm a fan of mystery games like Phoenix Wright and detective stories and stuff like that. I like to use that part of my brain.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool that you're into that kind of stuff. I like to say that I'm into puzzle stuff, but it's more I can't do number puzzle stuff like Sudoku and Picross stuff. Like for whatever reason, that part of my brain I cannot wrap around. But stuff like you said, like logic puzzles, like Phoenix Wright, I really like, and I have Tetris on my phone, and like I can just zone out and play Tetris for an hour, and completely forget. And then me and my wife like to play Pokemon puzzling on our 64 sometimes.
Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's but no, that is kind of cool that you'd kind of take that kind of concept and put it into a cartoon. I don't think that's something a lot of people would think to do and come out nearly as well as Puzzle Hunters has.
I mean, ideas by themselves are not really anything. It's all about how you execute them, and especially like the more out there idea, the more precise your execution has to be, or it'll slip off the rails. And that has happened a couple of times, where the show has kind of like not really embraced its puzzleness. But you know, the episode I'm working on now is more puzzle oriented. Alakazamiable is the one I'm thinking of that was not really puzzle oriented. It was more character focused. But then there's stuff like the crossword tournament and the third episode about the casino with the two discrete puzzles being solved at once. The wire tiles and the age-old mirror light puzzles. So yeah, this current episode I'm working on, their Harmony and Riff are going into they're trying to do a sting operation on this illegal underground puzzle club, And so that's the main basis for the episode. And then the 6th episode is like Harmony wins like this puzzle contest and gets taken deep underground the city to this like this nexus of information and puzzles that kind of like powers the city, and things quickly become dangerous for her. So like it's all about, you know, I don't necessarily have a specific puzzle in mind when I go into writing the scripts, but I do generally think like, you know, there has to be something, you know, there has to be some sort of puzzle element to this story.
Right.
And it sometimes it just doesn't happen, like in the case of the Alakazamia Bowl, but the other 5 episodes I think I've stuck to it pretty much.
Yeah, sure, man. I love it. I think like going along with your character designs and stuff, like you got a very vast array of character designs, but also I feel like some of your names are very interesting. Like I've never heard Lemurian or Orton as a character name, but I one question that's always kind of puzzled me, for lack of a better word, is why the main characters of Puzzle Hunters their names are music references.
I think that's something that ties into the Mega Rad Strangers pitch.
Oh, okay.
I think they at one point were like members of a band, because that totally goes along with the whole Scooby-Doo nature of,
Sure.
you know, like, not Jabberjaw, but like Josie and the Pussycats, or like those other shows, they would tend to have like a band element to them. And so it got abandoned with the Puzzle Hunters, but I just kept the names.
Okay.
And for Orton, not every name is like this, but for some characters, I will take a last name and make it a first name. Orton is the last name of this NFL quarterback who I don't think plays anymore, Kyle Orton. He used to play for the Chicago Bears and the Denver Broncos, and was mostly known for like being a party guy and not really being a very good quarterback. But like he had such a distinct last name that I felt like I should make a character's name this.
Right.
And so I did, and that's not always the case with every character. There are some, like Sage is based off of an NFL quarterback, Sage Rosenfels, who is only known for, he was like a backup quarterback that was mostly known for jumping up into the air, getting hit, and spinning in the air, losing a football. But you know, other characters. Lemurian, I'm not. I think I wanted something to rhyme with. I wanted to have a rhyming name. I don't think I came up with Barbarian first. I think I came up with Lemurian first, and then I said Space Barbarian. But like, I thought it needed to like sound like a fancy name, but also at the same time sound like it could be white trash. Like, sure. So like Lemurian, it sounds like aristocratic, but at the same time it also sounds made up.
Oh yeah, man, my wife just got out of a job where she worked at an inner city school, and my God, the name she would come home and tell me about is like, that doesn't sound real.
Yeah. Like it's fun to come up with names for characters. Sometimes I just stick with something very plain. The show I'm working on, I think the character names for the next show that I'm working on are going to be pretty plain. But like with some of these sillier stuff, it can be pretty fun. Like Princess Ness, like her first name really is Princess. Like she had her name changed, and Ness is her middle name. And I don't think I'll ever reveal her original first name or her last name. But yeah, like she just changed her last name because she thought, like, I think I'm basically using like time traveler logic of like, if somebody went back in time and just told people they were a princess and dressed nicely, people would probably believe them.
Yeah.
So, you know,
people in the past are dumb.
Yeah, people in the past are so dumb. Not like today.
No.
Not like today.
People aren't.
Remember
dumb.
when people used to think that the Earth was flat? Oh man, it's a good thing that there aren't people like that now.
Those are some dark days. We're all gonna die.
Someday.
Someday. Anyway, so on top of, you've got Deadly Space Action going and you got the Puzzle Hunters going, occasionally, I mean, even back in the day you would do this, but I feel like it's a little more frequent now. You'll occasionally just have these like little one-off 30-second, 1-minute cartoons.
Yep.
Is that when you put these things out, is it like, is just when an idea comes to you is like, oh, this could be a really funny joke, or do you like, okay, I'm gonna put like a short out this now and like kind of schedule it out?
Sometimes it's the result of an experiment, like the one at the dentist one was like, I'd like to try Squiggle Vision at least once, and I thought, like, well, there won't be any lip sync in it. This will be faster. No, it was not faster. It was very time consuming, actually. And then I had those characters already for when I did come up with another idea for them, because I was getting a little bit sick of seeing all the game theory cartoon, what if the Belchers are really dead?
Geez, yeah.
like all those kind of shows that are out there.
Right.
And so I thought I'll make fun of that, and I might go back to that well at some point, just because like I feel like that's an untapped, like there's so much you could do to make fun of theory channels. But another thing that I did recently was I participated in a drawing game with Joe Grant and some others, where we had like a bunch of ideas that we put into a randomizer. The words themselves weren't randomized, the phrases were randomized, so we would get, an idea that was not word salad. Like it was legitimately an idea. It was just chosen at random from a pile of ideas, and then we would have to draw a comic based on that. The one-offs that I'll be putting out, one I put out not like I think a couple months ago called They're Always Listening, that was based on one of those comics, and then there's one that's going to be going up next week. Well, I don't know when this episode of your podcast is going up, but it will be going up in August, called Message, I think.
Okay.
And then in September, I'll be putting up one called The Argument. They're actually all done, but I'm just trying to like kind of stagger out the releases to keep content fresh on my channel.
Sure.
So they're all very simple, all 30-second ideas. There's nothing too complicated about them, and I still will get ideas in my head. I had this idea today of like sort of like a battle of the bands kind of competition that you see in TV shows, where like someone's really good and then the next person has to come out, but it's about tweeting, and like so like I come out to the microphone after someone really good has just tweeted, and I'm just like, man, I sure have been drinking more water lately.
I like that idea.
Yeah, and there's a tweet by my friend that I might use about that. I won't repeat it. But like I've thought about doing that too. Basically, like what I get in since I do this Patreon schedule, like I'll decide like, all right, I'll do a bunch of these little one-off cartoons all at once and make that an update, because all of them combined together will equal the runtime of a normal update, and then I'll just have those to litter throughout the year.
Yeah, that works, man. Definitely getting content ahead of time, I think, is a good idea. And I mean, it's nice every now and then you get like that short little, just a short little quick gag in between the fuller episodes. So I think that's a good idea to how you're releasing that stuff. So I think the other big project I want to talk to you about is I think you've done it 2 years now, is your big game show E3 kind of summary show. So for for these shows, you've got your original character, the new character,
Rebecca.
Thank you. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But a lot of the other characters of that show are, your main cast from bonus stage that you brought back, obviously with updated designs and stuff. Was there a reason you decided to bring these characters back? Was it just because they fit in with the game aesthetic, or was there like any kind of reason for that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's that like they made the most sense to use. I had once tried to put Phil into like a comic that didn't go anywhere, and I thought like if I ever do a game thing, I'll use him, but not the full cast. And so like when I did game shows, the first E3 of game show on Cartoon Drive-Thru, I think was like 2013. It was just like one scene in a house where they were just like giving like a 40-second recap. And Rebecca's design was way different back then because she was a character for a cartoon that I abandoned called Now Fear This, where
wasn't she a zombie or something?
She was like a Frankenstein character. She was like a Frankenstein's monster. But that idea I abandoned, and so I un-Frankensteined her. And at that point, I think it was 2015. 2014. I don't know which year it was, but I decided like I'm gonna go bigger with this. I'm gonna try and do like a mega show where like they have reactions after each press conference.
Right.
And a lot of the build up for that was it was exhausting and grueling work weeks before E3 actually happened, and that's still how it is now. It's just not as grueling because I have taken steps to reduce the amount of animation and increase the corners cut. But yeah, it made sense at the time to just use Phil and Ellie, and then at one point I brought in Joel just to like throw old fans a bone and have like a minor amount of pathos. But like after that, like I was already kind of ready to retire that character again, and just stick with Phil because like Rebecca's already a foil at the desk, so it doesn't really make sense for there to be two different foils, especially when a character that has a lot of baggage like Joel's does. So I wrote him out, and now it's just Phil, Rebecca, and Ellie, and that composition works really well. I probably won't be adding anyone else to it because I don't think you really need anyone else like to cover E3, especially with how it's trending. Like more and more of it will end up being just like streams rather than live shows, so like to some extent like I'll be able to have a lot of material sort of planned out ahead of time because that stuff leaks a lot easier when the marketing material is already made for it. So you know, I usually get a few leaks come out the weeks before E3, and that's really what I write into the material as soon as possible, so that like the first day there's already timely content, even though I'll have like finished like wrapping it up the Saturday before E3.
Yeah, well, man, I think it's really cool that you're doing that, and especially hearing now that you've kind of found ways to not kill yourself trying to get that stuff out in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think doing the video footage was the best decision that I could make because people like it anyway, and that's really common for YouTube channels to begin with, is to narrate over footage. So it's something I may come back to in the future for other programming, because it's a lot easier. The setup work animation wise, if I wanted to do like a top 10 list, and I probably won't, but if I wanted to do something like that, each episode could just be like 15 seconds of lip synced, maybe even reused animation of the character at the desk,
Sure.
and then just going right into it. And then that's more content for the channel to keep people coming to it. I realize that this is a little bit mercenary to talk about it like this. Like, I'm just going to reuse content and not make, I'm obviously making new content on the Patreon, but these are the things that I have to consider to get stuff done on time and also to get a lot of stuff done on time.
Definitely, man. And I mean, I think if you need to sacrifice a little bit of the animation to get the content out faster, I mean, the dialogue and the reaction that you're putting out in these characters, I think, I personally think is enough to kind of satiate some people. So if you need to cut down the animation in order to get this stuff out on time, whatever works for you, man.
Yeah, and that's what I do for Game Show. Mm-hmm. My process for the other cartoons is pretty much the same. Like, not the same as Game Show, but I mean, like, I haven't changed up how I produce those since I've started the channel. The only difference is that, like, I'm more judicious with my time, so I'm just not spending as many hours a day doing it. And so, as a result, my updates are nowhere near as long as they used to be. And the cartoons aren't quite as long. Like, they'll be maybe, 3 minutes tops, rather than, like, 4 to 5 minutes. But I've also learned that you can still tell plenty of story in that amount of time. So, it's fine. It works out.
Yeah. And honestly, man, with as short of attention span as most people have these days, I think, putting out smaller chunks of animation in some kind of schedule, I think, honestly, probably maybe works better. I don't know.
Maybe it oscillates, like, because I think it depends, because, like, short form, like 45 seconds, like, that may or may not, but, like, the And We're thing that I did was 15 seconds, and that blew up. But also, like, my second most watched video is the Puzzle Hunters pilot, which has 47,000 views, and that's like a 15-minute cartoon. So, like, I don't know, like, it's hard to say. It's hard to predict what will really resonate with people. I do know that with Alakazamiable, I went into the analytics, and 10% of the viewing audience stopped immediately after the first 3 seconds, so I don't really know what that means, if they, like, realized they clicked on the wrong video or what, because, like, that episode opens with a pan, so it's not like they even had a chance to see the character designs to get repulsed or anything. So I just don't I don't know what happened. I don't know why they bounced.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have no idea what would be causing that, but I don't know. So another thing that I kind of admire about the content you put out is, I mean, not only are you doing most, if not all, the voices yourself, all the animation yourself, all the design yourself, you've been doing your own music too for most of it, which I think is really cool because I have no musical talent whatsoever. But you've got your own little your save states thing where you're doing all your music for your shows, which I think is really cool. What got you into crafting music? What's your kind of your process for making your music?
So it started with High Score, and I had been making like a couple of like really lame sort of electronic music things. I did like a cover of the Real Folk Blues that like I think Carl Olsen is still like, oh man, that's still so dope, and I'm like, it's really not. I had discovered there was a sound font at the time that was based on chiptune. It was based on the sounds of the NES, and it was not a very good chiptune, but to my dumb younger ears, I didn't really know the difference. I was just like, oh, it's bleep bloops. I love this. And so like that's when I did all the music for High Score and Bonus Stage, primarily through that sound font. Robot Sock, I think, was the name of the music back then. And then as bonus stage went on, I started to buy more serious like libraries, like orchestral libraries and stuff. A couple which I don't really use anymore, but also I don't have a CD drive, so I can't even install them. My computer, it's that kind of stuff has kind of become obsolete. But the downside of that is that I can't install older libraries.
Right.
So nowadays I have more accurate sound VSTs for video game sounds for 8-bit and 16-bit. I have not really done much 16-bit music outside of like the intentionally like kind of clangy ad-lib Sound Blaster style music in Sweet and Sour.
Sure.
Which, you know, I kind of wanted it to sound like the pinball machines I used to play in the 90s because, you know, obviously at some point they had digitized music, but there was a point at which they had like ad-lib sound cards in them, much like a they had FM sound cards in them, much like a computer, and there was something like really there's something really nostalgic to me about that sound, about that very metallic, very crunchy sound that I liked. The next album that I'm probably going to be doing for Save States, though, might be more of a Super Nintendo direction.
Okay.
I think like it's time to move on from just doing NES style music forever. Sure. Especially because like I'm not somebody that gets deep into the tweaking of knobs and stuff and duty cycles that like a lot of the big chiptune artists do and the more conventional trackers do.
Sure.
So you know, I'm mostly just about once I find sounds that I like, I usually stick with them. And now I'm ready to find some new sounds to make a band out of, essentially, because that's what I did with the NES stuff. And now I'm gonna do that with 16-bit music. And for each cartoon, I've generally had just kind of a different approach. For Deadly Space Action, I stick to very bombastic sounding music. I want it to harken to like Buck Rogers and stuff. I want it to have sort of that loud brass and very sort of like action-packed, like chaotic kind of music. Especially if I can then interrupt the music. That's also fun to have like dramatic music that then gets interrupted because like, you know, there's bureaucracy getting in the way of the action.
Right.
So like, and then with the Puzzle Hunters, it's largely been more funk oriented. It's largely been more funk and jazz oriented, club jazz. Soil and Pimp Sessions was a big influence for me. They did the music for Michiko and Hatchin, an anime that I really enjoyed, and I became really into this style. It was not pioneered by them, but this style of jazz that is very fast, but also has this kind of like samba percussion to it.
Sure.
And then with let's see what else. Princess Ness. What was my main thing there? I guess it was just regular orchestral music. You know, like this. It was around the time of Princess Ness when I started realizing, like, it is time to start, you know, coming up with more sounds and add to sort of my palette so that I'm not limiting myself.
Sure.
Of course, that also means spending a lot of money, so you know I have to be really careful about that.
Gotta spend money to make money, I guess.
Sort of.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I would say that like the lifetime sales of my music total has maybe paid for the music libraries that I bought. That's not a great feeling. Like it's like, yeah, I broke even. Okay, like you know, after several years, I've broken even. I prefer more than that.
Yeah.
But you know, it's fine. I get plenty of recommendations from people, and people like the music. So, at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Yeah, definitely, man. And we'll definitely link to your Bandcamp websites so people can check out your music, because Matt makes good music, guys. You should go check it out. There was something I forgot. I wanted to ask you, because this little quick thing. Going back to game show for just a hot second.
Okay.
When you did the character redesigns for your old for the bonus stage characters, one thing I've always wanted to know, for Ellie's redesign, was her design kind of a reference to like Parker Jacobs' Aquabats art? Because she kind of
No.
No?
No. I actually, over the last several years, I've become, really entranced with the art of Elio, this guy that draws really cute comics, and Ashley Davis, who does a comic called Jailbird.
Okay.
I'm a fan of, and it's not just them. There was a character designer, I think either Corey Yost or Carlos Ramos, who designed for Clone High, and I think that he did the X's on Nickelodeon. But he there's this aesthetic of the eyes being slightly offset, where one is slightly higher than the other. That is really, really cool looking to me. And I've been very much about trying out different styles of eye spacing and facial features. I think that Harmony's nose is extremely bizarre, and I'm all for that.
Sure, yeah.
That was something that I wanted to make sure stayed from the pilot. But when I went from the pilot to series, I wasn't a huge fan of the rest of the design of her face. So I thought, how about I do the offset eyes a little bit, but also make them glasses, but also make them kind of thinner eyes and close together. And I kind of have been on this streak of trying out different configurations of how the features can be mapped to the face. And Ellie was one of those experiments where I wanted to see how close the eyes could be together, how tall they could be, because the original Ellie in High Score had humongous eyes. So
Yeah.
I wanted to retain that, but do it in a more modern style, more modern sensibility.
Okay.
And then with Phil, Rebecca already had a design from another show, from her show that I abandoned. But with Phil, I thought I'll kind of start with the bonus stage design as sort of a base point, but modernize it. So instead of triangle eyes, he has more very, very thin, very put together eyes that he's got a lot of empty space on his head, which is on purpose.
Right.
I want a lot of his face to be very closed in and compact, especially because I can then explode it out when he gets mad. So yeah, that's very much what I've been doing artistically, and the cartoon I'm working on next is not even going to have noses in it. So it's another way for me to see how the features can create a completely different looking character based on their proportion and spacing. Yeah, that's about it. That's the end of that question.
Well, that's really interesting, man. I'm always interested to hear how people construct their characters like that, and that's an interesting way of updating older characters like that. So yeah, so we talked a little bit about do puzzles and stuff like that. So when you're not working on your animations or your music, what do you do just to relax? What helps you unwind?
I like to play video games, and I like to clear out my Steam backlog, which I admit is another type of work. Because for a while I was doing a very it's still ongoing currently, but I'm not going to be running it for much longer. Game channel, a separate game show channel where it's just Let's Plays.
Right.
And the purpose of that was not to find an audience. The purpose of that was just to put pressure on myself to like actually finish the games I was playing.
Sure, yeah.
And I ended up doing like 125 game playthroughs for that channel in the span of a year, which is a lot of games to beat in a year. And I'm ready to kind of like slow that down a bit, especially because like I'm planning a move to Minneapolis, and I might be taking a part-time non-animation job to supplement my income, and so there's not going to be as much time to just like record a full game playthrough of something, you know.
Sure.
And so you know, I also will sometimes watch cartoons, but I'm so very behind. And I will watch anime as well. Most recent thing that I watched was Yuri on Ice.
Okay.
but like obviously I'm gonna shill for my friend Ian. Watch OKKO, Let's Be Heroes. It's a great cartoon.
Yes.
And I will shill for another former coworker, Matt Burnett. The show is not out yet, but he and his writing partner Ben Levin, who used to write for Steven Universe, are now doing a show called Craig of the Creek, and that will premiere, I think, later this year. I could be wrong. Maybe it's 2018, but be on the lookout for that as well.
Man. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I completely forgot they were doing a show, and I absolutely love those guys.
Yeah, did you ever watch the stuff that they used to put out on YouTube?
Yeah, they're for tax reasons.
Yes.
Channel. Oh God! Every year at Christmas, I'll break out
in your base, stealing your manger.
Yes, exactly. that is a Christmas tradition for me.
That is a great, like, that whole series is great, and I'm so glad that they've moved on to such big things, because they're really talented people, the two of them. And they're a powerhouse tag team, the two of those guys. Other than that, like, I'll watch Bob's Burgers on occasion. Let me dig in. Like, literally, I have a TV backlog text file of like stuff that I have watched and stuff that I intend to watch. That's just kind of like the nature of like compartmentalizing and organizing my life the way that I have.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you in the sense that, like, I needed to sit down and make a list of, like, here's the stuff here's what stuff I'm behind on, here's what I need to watch, because, like, it's hard to compartmentalize, like, everything that I'm behind on.
So this might be interesting for people, the young animators out there who are listening. So how I usually do things is I have a file that keeps all of my I'll take my script and I will jot in front of it an open parentheses and then 4 underscores, and the parentheses represents a storyboard and a layout. So if I do the storyboard for that shot, I'll put S in there. If I put the C in there, that means that, like, I did a layout on that scene is complete, move on. And then for the 4 underscores, that represents background, animation, lip sync, and facial animation. And so I will, that's for each shot. And so, like, you know, when I've decided on, you know, this is the chunk of script that I'm going to animate for this update, I will count it up. I'll be like, there are 18 lines in this episode, 18 lines of script in this episode, each one, you know, like 18 shots essentially. And so that means that there are 90 things that I have to do between the start of this turnaround and the end. And so, you know, in a 14-day span, that usually means that I have to get like 6 or 7 things done a day. Usually what happens is, like, I usually storyboard half of the cartoon one day and half of the cartoon the next day, so that brings the average down. And then I'll lay out, you know, the easiest shots first. So I usually get a ton of stuff done. Like today, during this interview, I've been animating a couple of things.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I've done 2 different shots So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've done 7 things today during this interview, leaving me like 44 things left to do. Now, TV watching, not quite the same thing. I don't compartmentalize my TV watching that specifically.
Right.
But I do watch, I do jot down, like, this is how many episodes I have of this show. This is a show I downloaded that I have not started yet and really should. And doing that, it doesn't necessarily always help me to get started on a show, but, like, it at least keeps me from, like, adding too much more to the pile. Because I'm like, you finish what you started eating before you put more on your plate. So yeah, it's a little embarrassing that I do this, but like it's also somewhat necessary. Like it is kind of weird that like I take such a workmanlike approach to relaxation, but I think when your brain is wired a certain way, it's the only way you can be. So some of the shows that I'm into are like We Bare Bears is a show that I'm definitely into. It's disposable. It's not like, you know, there's not like a heavy story arc throughout the series. Like I can tap in and tap out whenever I want.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously I'm a big fan of Steven Universe. I have not seen the new DuckTales yet, but I will try it and give that a look. I like Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I was a big fan of the visuals of the visual animation and sight gags of Wander Over Yonder. I love the animation style of that show.
Yeah.
I wish Craig luck in, you know, whatever he does next. I don't know what he's doing right now. I haven't heard anything what he's up to recently. Yeah. And then on the anime side, it's like I've watched stuff like Flip Flappers and Kaiji and Read or Die and Wakakuzake, sorry. Gosh, these names. But also like Azumagadayo and School Rumble. Like I watched so many different genres. Like I prefer shoujo, but like I will watch a lot of comedy. I will watch a lot of lighthearted stuff. Like one of my favorite cartoons from the last 5 years is an anime called Barakamon, which is not about Barack Obama. It's about a calligrapher who punches one of his critics and is punished by his dad to go live out in the boondocks, out in the country, with some really adorable kids who have like actual child voice actors. It's such a cute show. I love it a lot. I'm a big fan of like healing type shows that are like, they don't necessarily have a ton going on, but they're just like so positive and rosy and vibrant that it's like a pleasant way to spend the rest of my day, like unwinding when the rest of the world is shitty. Like I can enjoy something that is more optimistic and cheerful.
Yeah, this makes you feel all warm inside. Well, that's cool, man. I haven't heard of a lot of those the anime, so I'll have to check some of those out.
Yeah.
But well, the only other question I have for you is basically just to ask, is there any upcoming projects that you'd want to let people know, or anything you're allowed to talk about right now?
Yeah, so I am currently working on a show called Astro Cat, and it's a cross between a magical girl show and like a Don Quixote, like Inspector Gadget kind of situation, where the character who is the magical girl is not very good at identifying the actual evil threats. And sort of their Guy Friday, like their sidekick is more adept at pointing them in the right direction and sometimes having to take care of it themselves.
That's funny.
And so that show doesn't have an estimated date of arrival yet because I haven't started animating it yet or writing the scripts. I just have some script outlines. I'm still trying to decide like what's the ideal length of episode that can cover these storylines. How many Patreon updates is that going to take? Because, you know, last year Princess Ness took the entire year to do on Patreon for 7 episodes, 4 of which will be coming out later this year once I put the proper voice acting in and touch up the backgrounds a little bit. So, you know, I'm realizing, like, that if I do that again, people might not be a fan of that because, you know, people are also a fan of the variety of stuff that I have. You know, there'll be people who are like, bring back Sweet and Sour, or more Puzzle Hunters, or more Deadly Space Action. So, like, you know, I do want to keep the story arcs, like, short enough, update-wise, that, like, you know, every couple of months I can switch over to something else. So, we'll see how that goes. And that's sort of the necessary evil of doing it by yourself, is that, like, you can't just, like, offshore this to an animation studio and then work on the next thing. You can only work on what's in front of you at any given moment. And I feel like my rate of output is already very high, like tremendously high. You know, this year I'll probably be putting out, when all is said and done, like 30 minutes of animation. So, like, you know, that's a lot for any one person to do in a year. So, like, there's not necessarily any incentive to push myself further. All I can do, and I know it sucks for people, is put out, you know, maybe like 1 or 2 story arcs for each series a year. You know, even though I'm sure they would like to see, you know, a full season all at once. The logistics of it, the actual time-consuming nature of the production makes it impossible.
Oh, sure, yeah, man. I mean, personally, I do like the variety. I think it keeps things fresh, and I mean, I can't obviously speak for you, but maybe that, you know, being able to jump onto a new idea and kind of cycle around thing keeps you from getting burnt out on one idea.
It does, and that's, like, there are not many episodes of Sweet and Sour because I would not want to work on Sweet and Sour primarily, but Sweet and Sour has always been sort of like my palate cleanser, no pun intended, to, like, to go between series and be like, you know, here's something I can do it's almost like a one-off in some sense because I'm, you know, not going to come back to it again for another year. Like, I think a year and a half ago I did one about, you know, Black Friday, about, you know, Thanksgiving. And that's generally how it is. It's like, all right, I'm going to take a break from my shows. I'll do a Sweet and Sour thing. Let me think of, like, a current, like, retail trend that I can kind of, you know, base for an episode and have some humor in. And then I'll be like, all right, 1 episode. I'm done with that. Let's move on.
Yeah, there you go. Well, man, I mean, I'm sure I speak for a lot of people. I mean, we are constantly impressed with the amount of stuff you're able to do on your own like that. So, I mean, that's really admirable that you can get to do that. Well, that's all the questions I have. Sorry.
It was a long talk.
Yeah, we've been going for, oh God, almost 2 hours now. Jesus. Sorry, listeners, for anyone who's still listening at this point.
There was a lot to go through.
Yeah, and I greatly enjoyed talking to someone I have admired and, dare I say, has shaped part of my artistic career. So thank you.
It's so weird to hear, but thank you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I like to give credit where credit's due, and I mean, like, real talk, man. You've been a huge inspiration to me. You know, my sense of humor, my art style, just how I approach art in general, just over the years, has really shaped a lot of what I've done. So I mean,
sort of in the spirit of that, I am releasing, and I made this change a few months ago, but, like, my cartoons are now released under Creative Commons attribution license. And I'm going to be I just added the Patreon tier, but I haven't actually posted in it yet. But there's going to be a Patreon tier that gives you the Flash files for my cartoons. So, like, if you want to do your own fan cartoon, you can do it with your own assets if you want, you know, or you can donate $25 for a month and get the assets and then undonate after the month is over, because I know that's how I know that's how a lot of people operate, and I don't begrudge you that. Yeah. I don't begrudge you that. But like, I want people to make their own fan stuff. That was a big thing. Like, that's the thing that I think is lacking in my ability to generate an audience, is community building. There's not like a great way to build a community on YouTube, and I'm floating. I'm probably going to start a community Discord soon for the Patreon users, and then extend that out eventually. I'm nervous about just letting anybody from YouTube join a Discord because of the danger that brings. But but like, I do see a value in, because when Bonus Stage was really popular, people were making all sorts of fan cartoons.
I remember that.
Yeah, people would post them on the forums, and I would have no hacking idea. Like, they had their own pathos to it. Like, they had their own storylines and OCs. And at the time, I was like, ugh. But now I'm like, that's really rad that people have these OCs and their own conceptions of what their idea of the show would be. So, like, I'm all for that. I'm all for people doing fan art, fan cartoons, fan tributes of any kind. So I'm hoping that this will, like, spark that a little bit. If people want to, do their own Princess Ness episode or Deadly Space Action episode or Puzzle Hunters episode, they can. And I'll probably at some, like, I don't see why I shouldn't just put up a Bonus Stage Flash file. I know it's an old ass file from Flash 4 or 5, but like, that'll be useful for somebody. I'm sure they can see how I did it back then.
Why not?
I also added a commentary track here to my Patreon as well. So I started off with the first season of Deadly Space Action, which was already recorded, but future posts, I'll be running through each story arc of Deadly Space Action Season 2 and the minisodes. I'll be doing, obviously, the Puzzle Hunters pilot and series, the two Princess Ness story arcs. I realized that this is sort of the shilling portion of the podcast right at the end, so I wanted to get that stuff in. I may as well say the rest. Twitter, you can find me, Matt Wilson CSS. Patreon is patreon.com/cartoon drive-thru. And the channel itself, Cartoon Drive-Thru, is youtube.com/c/cartoon drive-thru. Like, /c/cartoon drive-thru is like how they do the custom URLs now. So it's a little weird, but if you search for it otherwise, you'll get this weird URL that I cannot repeat because it's like, 256 random characters.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, cool. And we'll definitely make sure to link those in the description. So guys, please go check out Matt's stuff. Go check out Cartoon Drive-Thru, his Patreon, his music, all that kind of stuff. Go support this man because he makes great work and has entertained me for years. And if you haven't already seen his cartoons, I'm sure you'll also get some enjoyment at it if you like listening to us at all. But Matt, thank you so much for doing this interview. It has been an immense pleasure getting to talk to one of my biggest inspirations. So it's been great getting to talk to you, man.
That's cool.
Yeah. So guys, I think that about does it for us this week. I apologize, this is going to be like an over 2-hour show, but hey man, when am I going to get an opportunity like this again? So thank you all for listening. Go check out all Matt's stuff, and we'll catch you next week with something. I don't know, I've got a schedule somewhere. But we'll just catch you all guys next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ink and Paint Club podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can catch a new episode every week. Also be sure to follow us on our Facebook and Twitter so you can keep up with the show. Links are in the description. We'll see you next week.